After midnight in July 1986, Stephanie Brown gave some friends a ride home to a part of town she wasn't familiar with. To return to her apartment, she was instructed to take Interstate 5 north, a major route in California. Despite the directions, Stephanie mistakenly headed the wrong way. Later, a fisherman walking along a trail in a remote mountain area outside Sacramento, California, found the partially clothed body of a young woman lying face down in a flooded irrigation ditch. Around her neck was a purple band of discoloration, indicating ligature strangulation. The autopsy revealed traces of semen, but the samples were too degraded for DNA testing. The victim was identified as 19-year-old Stephanie Brown, a bank teller in Sacramento. When the police discovered that Stephanie had her hair in a ponytail the day before she died, they realized that her killer had cut it. Ray Biondi, who headed Sacramento's homicide unit, immediately thought, "We're dealing with someone with a very perverse fetish, cutting hair." Brown's car was later found 20 miles away on Interstate 5, heading in the opposite direction of her apartment. The car was full of gas and fully operational. It seemed likely that Brown was lost and might have stopped to ask someone for directions. Just 1 month later, another incident occurred along Interstate 5. 26-year-old Charmaine Sabra and her mother were returning home after dinner when their car broke down on a deserted stretch of Interstate 5. A man in a dark sports car stopped and offered assistance. Charmaine and her mother explained that the car wouldn't start after hearing a noise. The man offered them a ride but said he could only take one person since his car was a two-seater. Charmaine reassured her mother, saying, "I'll be back as soon as I can." Unfortunately, that was the last time her mother ever saw her. Months later, in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains outside Sacramento, California, a hunter discovered the badly decomposed remains of a white female. The remains had been scattered by animals, but investigators recovered the skull, torso, and some clothing, including a purple skirt, a dark blouse, and alligator-heeled shoes. The clothing matched what Charmaine Sabra had been wearing when she disappeared after accepting a ride 3 months earlier on Interstate 5. Dental x-rays confirmed the remains were Charmaine Sabra's. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Investigators found that the side seam of Charmaine's blouse had been cut and used as a ligature around her neck, along with a piece of yellow nylon cord. Her pantyhose had been cut in 2 places and tied around her wrists, and there were cuts on her slip and the shoulder straps of her bra. 2 weeks later, police were called to another homicide 35 miles southeast of Sacramento. The victim had been hogtied with her own tank top, with her arms bent behind her back and the tank top looped over her neck in a ligature strangulation. Her halter top and socks had been cut in the same distinctive, non-functional manner as the previous victims. Dental records identified the remains as 20-year-old Laura Hedick. The last time anyone saw Laura, she was in an area known for prostitution. Laura left with a customer in a white car. Police were convinced that the murders were connected. In response, police set up decoys dressed as prostitutes and as motorists in distress along Interstate 5 in an attempt to lure the killer into their trap. Despite their best efforts, the murders continued. On Sunday, June 21, 1987, a family hiking in the remote woods of Deer Creek, Amador County, discovered blood on the trail. The victim was identified as 25-year-old Karen Finch, a divorced mother of a 2-year-old daughter. Her car, found near Interstate 5, was fully operational, with her sandals still inside. Investigators found a fragment of duct tape in Karen's hair, triggering a realization this was similar to the Stephanie Brown case, where the killer had cut the victim's hair. The bodies of the victims were usually found far from where the killer could have parked his vehicle, suggesting they were forced to walk, possibly with their hands bound. A few weeks later, the nude, decomposed body of 17-year-old Darcy Frackenpole was found in a remote area off Highway 50 near Lake Tahoe. She had been strangled, and her blouse was tied around her neck with a wooden garrote. Investigators found 2 pieces of nylon rope near her clothing, the type used in parachute cords. The killer had an obsession with cutting his victims' clothing, a ritual so important that he brought a pair of scissors to each crime scene. The relentless efforts to connect the evidence were overwhelming for the investigators, but it was clear they were dealing with an experienced killer who perfected his techniques with each case. The only lead was the distinct way he carried out the murders, with his signature use of rope and the peculiar cutting of clothing. A few months later, an unrelated incident caught the attention of the homicide team. Deborah Guffey, a street prostitute in downtown Sacramento, reported a disturbing encounter. A man in a car offered her a ride, but when they parked, he became violent, smashing her head into the dashboard and attempting to handcuff her. Guffey managed to escape, and a nearby police officer intervened. The attacker, 48-year-old Roger Kibbe, was arrested and charged with the assault. Roger Kibbe, a public storage facility manager, was married and had a daughter from a previous marriage. A background check revealed that 30 years earlier, at the age of 15, he had been arrested for stealing women's underwear from clotheslines and cutting it in a random, non-functional way with his mother's scissors. Kibbe had also told police at the time that he had a terrible relationship with his mother. Further investigation revealed that Kibbe was a parachutist, a significant detail since parachute rope had been found at one of the murder scenes. Another coincidence was that Kibbe's brother was a homicide detective in Nevada, raising suspicions that the killer had knowledge of homicide investigative techniques. Roger Kibbe owned 2 different cars, one of which resembled the vehicle that had picked up Charmaine Sabra. In the other car, police found rope with a garrote tied to the ends, a set of handcuffs, and a pair of scissors. At that point, the police knew they had found their killer. Roger Kibbe was identified as the killer, but at that time, there wasn't enough evidence to press murder charges. An expert in trace evidence examined the thousands of hairs, fibers, and found 2 blue nylon carpet fibers on Darcy Frackenpole's dress that matched the carpet in Roger Kibbe's car in color, size, shape, and chemical composition. The expert also found fungal spores on the fibers. These same spores were found on fibers from Kibbe's car floor mat. Additionally, a human hair found on one of the victim's dresses was similar to hair taken from Kibbe's inner thigh. When examining the pantyhose used to bind Charmaine Sabra's wrists, the scientist found small fibers on the back of the leg area. These fibers were similar to those on the seat of one of Kibbe's cars. The trace evidence expert then analyzed pieces of rope found in Kibbe's car and storage shed. The rope appeared identical to that found near Darcy Frackenpole's body. She noticed red paint and black particles on the rope. Another criminalist provided a piece of rope from a prior assault case involving Roger Kibbe, which had the same particles. This was a strong link between Kibbe and Frackenpole. The red paint stains found on the ropes at all 3 scenes placed Kibbe at the locations. Prosecutors confidently declared they had their man. Roger Kibbe was charged with the murder of Darcy Frackenpole. On March 18, 1991, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. Roger Kibbe had confessed to his wife shortly after his arrest, admitting to killing 5 people. In an emotional conversation arranged by the police, he tearfully told her he had killed 4 people. Roger Kibbe died away around 12:40 a.m. on February 28, 2021, at Mule Creek State Prison. His body was discovered by an officer, and his cellmate, Jason Boudreau, 40, was found at the scene. Boudreau, who openly identifies as a Satanist and was already serving a life sentence for the 2010 strangulation of 48-year-old Margaret Dalton, confessed to killing Kibbe as an act of vengeance for Kibbe's victims. He has been charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances for Kibbe's death. However, prosecutors have stated they will not pursue the death penalty. Boudreau received a second life sentence for the murder of Roger Kibbe.